Good morning, everybody. So, everybody had a chance to read. Are there any questions over the readings? Everybody's all ready to show me how brilliant you are? All right, let's go ahead and get to it. Put your notes up. All right, so who were the progressives? It's a trick question, but yes.
The people in the growing, like the community. They helped with the poor.
Okay, so the growing middle class,
Yes.
right, who are trying to help the poor. So I will go ahead and throw it out here. The book calls them liberals. There's 2 Republican presidents and 1 Democratic president. So I would be really cautious with throwing, liberal, conservative. They also actually pushed for prohibition, which I would not think is necessarily a liberal thing. But it's people who care about people, right? And what are their goals? We kind of already threw it out there, but what do they want to do?
They want to make government efficient and business more honest.
Okay, they want to make efficient government that is responsive to the people, or honest government that's responsive to the people, and businesses safer and better for the workers, right? So they really do want to help the poor. They want to make sure that life is better for people. So let's go ahead and talk about the first progressive president. This one amazes me and kind of amuses me. All right, in your heads, I want you to think about this kid, all right? This kid is born. He has severe asthma. He's almost blind in one eye. He's really weak. He is not able to do a lot. So what does this kid do?
He has to fight for everything.
Okay, now see, you actually know the story. But when you think about this kid, you would think, oh, this kid's going to sit and just play computer games and, try to survive, right? Well, yes. What does Roosevelt do?
He has to fight for everything.
He starts boxing and wrestling and rowing and mountain climbing. These are not things that you would normally suggest, hey, you have asthma and you're almost blind. Why don't you do these things, right? Why does he do this? Make himself stronger. He says, I'm going to beat the weakness out of myself. I am going to be strong in spite of what my body wants. I am going to, by force of will, make myself strong. So he becomes a competitive athlete. He's raised in New York City. He runs for the state legislature and he gets a position. His life is going well, right? Until one day somebody comes into the legislature and they're like, hey, Mr. Roosevelt, you need to go home. He goes home and he finds out his mother just died. Now that's pretty tough, right? And after he finds out his mother died, he has a 2-day-old daughter. He goes home to his house and he watches his wife die of kidney failure. Now, I don't know about you, that's some pretty devastating news, right? Your mom dies and your wife dies on the same day. But you know what makes it worse? What day is it? February 14th. So his mother and his wife die on Valentine's Day. He just writes in his diary, he just writes this X and he says, the light has gone out of my life. I don't know about you guys, but yeah, I would be like, I don't even want to do this anymore, right? So Roosevelt quits the legislature, leaves his daughter with his sister, and goes out to North Dakota and buys a ranch. He's like, you know what? I just don't even want to be here. I'm going to go out in the middle of nowhere and I'm going to make it because I'm going to be tough and I'm going to survive this. He goes out to North Dakota. He builds this ranch in western North Dakota, and that year they have one of the worst blizzards that they have had, and all his cattle die. At this point, what do you think about this guy? Is his life going to be good, bad, or indifferent?
Suicidal.
Yeah, I mean, he's done everything he can, and he can't catch a break, right? I mean, asthma, going blind, his wife, his mother, he loses everything. So he comes back and he enters the race for mayor of New York City, and he doesn't win. Yeah, that's when you're like, okay, what more can I do, right? Anybody know what he does next? They make him the civil service commissioner. When he was working in the legislature, one of the things he did is stamp out corruption. He sees political life like he sees his body. It's healthy, but any corruption is like sickness. And what did he do to sickness in his body? He beat it out. What do you think he does to corruption in politics? Yeah, he beats it out. He actually is quoted at one point as saying, I'm a very strong party man, but if I ever meet a corrupt politician, I will take their head off, right? He is ready to get rid of corruption. He does such a good job that they make him the police commissioner. What's the job of the police commissioner? Somebody help me. Okay, to reduce crime, right? To get rid of crime. Does he do a good job? Yes. That's what he does. So the next time we see him, he's moved to be the Assistant Secretary of the Navy. His career is going really well. He is going to make something of himself. And all of a sudden the Spanish-American War starts, and we will get to that next class period. But what does this guy like to do? He likes to fight. So he quits his job as the Assistant Secretary of the Navy, and he starts finding his own unit of men to go invade Cuba. Not that we were trying to take over the Cubans, but we were trying to beat up the Spanish who are holding Cuba as a territory. So he's like, you know what? We're going to make this work. I'm going to go down. He makes a name for himself. Everybody's heard of the Rough Riders. So he comes back. When he comes back, he runs for governor. You have a guy who has survived all this hardship, who has been the civil service commissioner, who has been the chief of police or the commissioner of the police, who has been an assistant secretary of the Navy, and now is a war hero. What do you think his shot is at getting to be governor? Really high. He is elected. What is his job as governor in his eyes? Get rid of corruption. Beat out the corruption, right? So he starts getting rid of corruption in the state of New York. If you are one of the corrupt politicians in New York, how do you get rid of this guy?
You gotta beat him in an election.
Okay, you have to either beat him in an election, which that's probably not going to happen. You have to catch him doing something illegal, probably not going to happen. Or you promote him out of the job. Is there a position that is better than governor, but really has no power or authority? Yes. Anybody know what it is?
Vice President.
Vice President. So, I might have to embarrass myself. Is there anybody here who can name me the last 20 vice presidents? No. Can you tell me what the last, the most key thing that the last 10 vice presidents have done? Not really. I mean, their job is to hang out and wait for the president to die, right? And it doesn't happen very often. So they just kind of get to do the things that the president doesn't want to do. So the guys in New York are like, you know what? Let's go ahead and we will get him on the Republican ticket as the vice president. That gets him out of New York. He's the vice president. He can't do anything to us. They're super happy, right? So they get him on the ticket with McKinley. Anybody know what happens? McKinley wins. McKinley runs against William Jennings Bryan. The Republicans run saying, hey, we're in a better position than we were 4 years ago. We're in a better position. You should vote for us. The Democrats say, we've got this Spanish-American War going on, and now we're doing some bad things. But at the end of the day, people cared about, hey, my life is looking better. I've got more money. I have a better opportunity. And so McKinley wins 51.7% of the popular vote. And who is our vice president?
Theodore Roosevelt.
Theodore Roosevelt. Interestingly enough, who do you know more about? Theodore Roosevelt or McKinley? Any reason why? Yes. September 6, 1901, McKinley is giving a speech. While he is giving a speech, a man named Leon Czolgosz, after the speech is over, you know how presidents like to shake everybody's hand and kiss babies and everything? Leon Czolgosz is a guy who has had a mental illness. He grew up on a farm. He went into town. There was a problem. And so he kind of lost it. He had a mental breakdown. He lost his job. He's returned to the farm. But his family's like, we want to get him out, hopefully see if there's anything. Is there any mental hospitals that are good at this point? No. You put somebody in a mental hospital, it's pretty much like throwing them in jail. They're not going to get help. So they were like, here, why don't you go to town, try to do something. While he's in town, he goes to a meeting of anarchists. What do anarchists want? No government, yeah. Anarchists believe that everybody could just be happy if we got rid of all government, right? And everybody just did what they wanted to do. I mean, that would probably be good, except that some people want to kill people, other people want to steal everything you have. So government's pretty good. But he goes to this meeting and they say, you know what? Everyone's life could be so much better if we just didn't have the government. If you are mentally ill and you hear someone say that we could have a better life if we didn't have government officials, what do you think? Would this be an opportunity to kill the president? So he goes up, he wraps his hand like it's broken, and he walks up and point blank shoots the president. This time, nobody needs to, stick their fingers in the wound or anything. He just dies. Now, this is the worst case scenario for the corrupt New York politicians, right? What happens when he dies?
Roosevelt becomes president.
Roosevelt is now the president. You thought he was bad as a governor. You have not seen anything yet. So Roosevelt is the first progressive president. He says, I'm going to see the country as I see myself. I am strong, I am vigorous, but I remain strong and vigorous by beating out the sickness. He says the U.S. is strong and vigorous. We need to keep it that way by beating out any corruption, any garbage that's going on. And he is a progressive because he wants to help the poor. He wants to make sure that we lift people up, right? So instead of saying, hey, I'm rich, I have what I want, you're down there, He's like, nope, we're going to try to lift everybody up. So in 1902, there's a coal strike. The strikers are like, all we want to be recognized as a union. We want a 9-hour workday, and we want a 20% pay increase. The coal mine owners are like, no, no, and no. Why would Roosevelt need to get involved? Does anybody care about coal?
That's what they put in trains.
Okay, it's what you put in trains, so it keeps commerce moving. My grandparents actually had a little coal area in their basement because at this time, all houses were heated with coal, right? All businesses are going to be heated with coal. Factories work based on coal, right? Or the electric is created with coal. So, is coal important? Absolutely. Roosevelt kind of lets it go for a while, but when it gets to be October and he's like, hey, there are going to be people dying because they don't have heat in their house, they don't have heat in their jobs. No, we're not going to do this. So he has a conference and he brings in the coal miners, the representatives, and he brings in the owners of the coal mines. And he sits there and he says, all right, we're going to resolve this, right? And he turns to the miners' representatives and he said, are you guys willing to compromise? And the miners go, well, yes. And he turns to the owners and he said, are you guys willing to compromise? And they said, we don't need to compromise. Roosevelt considered throwing one of them out the window, and they were like on the 8th floor or something like that. So this would have been a really bad thing. Thankfully, he prevented himself from doing that. What does he do though? He says, you know what? I'm going to take over the coal mines and I'm going to have the army mine the coal mines. So why would he do that?
This is a choice. It's either this or that.
Okay, because the coal's going to come out. If you guys can't figure it out, I'm taking the coal. You won't get the money. You won't get the benefit of using it. Is it legal for him to take over the coal mines and mine it with the army? Absolutely not. There is no legality to it, right? Does this stop Roosevelt? No, he's like, do you want to play or do you not want to play? What do you think happens?
Compromise.
There's a compromise. Everybody's like, oh, okay, hang on. So the strikers earn the 9-hour workday and they get a 10% pay increase. Not everything they look for, but pretty good, right? The next thing that happens is he pushes for the Elkins Act. The Elkins Act, if you remember, the populace, the farmers are saying, hey, it's not fair. If I have loads of stuff, then the trains charge me less. But if I have small bits of stuff, they charge me more. And he's like, you know what, you're absolutely right. It gets Congress to go ahead and pass saying there will be a cost for a railroad car. It doesn't matter, like if you fill up 1/4 of the car, then you pay 1/4 of the price if they can fill the car up. But you pay an equal price for sending your stuff through the railroad. We're not going to have, some people get better prices, some people get worse prices. So the progressives feel very much like Roosevelt did. These are, for the most part, middle-class people, right? So where do these middle-class people come from?
Factors.
Okay, the poor, right? So their lives are doing better. Now, they could become one of the people that says, you know what? With social Darwinism, I'm doing better, therefore I'm better than you, and too bad to be you, right? But what do they say instead? They care about the poor people. And they're like, hey, we were able to get to a better position. We want to lend you a hand and pull you up with us. And then everybody does better. So, just so we're clear, there is a group of people now that call themselves progressives. They are progressives. I'll say that's fine. But they are not the same kind of people as the progressives then. So, again, the author calls the progressives liberals. I would say they come from all spectrums. There are people from the far right. There are people from the far left. There are people who are extremely strong evangelical Christians. There are people who are not Christians at all. So there's a load of different kind of progressives. But the main thing that happens is when you're poor and you're working 14 hours a day or even 12 hours a day, 6 days a week, how much time do you have to worry about making life better for other people? None. You're like, hey, I'm just trying to survive, right? What happens when you become middle class and say at this point, almost all the time it would be a husband is making a pretty good living for his family, right? And you're the wife and you're sitting at home and you're raising your kids and you're talking to other wives. Now you have time to read. You can read the newspapers. You can talk to people as you're at various events, right? And now you have the time to say, you know what? Life is not as good for other people as it is for us. Why don't we help those people? And you get together with all these other people and you say, let's do something for them. So their goals, I want an honest government. Why do I want an honest government? Who does a corrupt government hurt the worst? The poor. Because if I have money, I can make the government work for me. If I'm poor, then I just get stomped on all the time, right? So they said, no, we want an honest government. We want an efficient government. Why do you want an efficient government?
We'll get it done.
Because then you get things done and you can help the poor, right? They wanted safe and healthy business practices. That's going to include, not quite yet, but things like OSHA. We're going to have better hours. We're going to get kids out of the factories. We're going to try to have better conditions in terms of safety. One of the other things that they really push for is prohibition. Why do you think they want prohibition?
Because people are consuming too much alcohol.
Okay, so a lot of these people are coming in, they're poor, they have loads of people in the household. When they get off work, they just go to the bar and they drink. And sometimes they drink their entire salary before they get home and pay the rent. There's other issues because do you want drunk people working in a factory? What are the chances somebody's going to get hurt? Yeah. So they're like, you know what? We want to make sure that these people are doing okay. All right. The other piece that ties into this is the populists and the Grangers. Right? What did the Grangers prove? You guys are starting to scare me.
The farmers can swing election.
Okay, farmers can swing election. People can influence politics. If people can influence politics and I want to make life better with an honest and efficient government, what do I need to do?
Get support.
I need to get a group of people and we are going to change the government. We are going to influence the government to make the changes that need to be made. So there are a few ways that people start making changes. One of them is the YMCA. Anybody ever hear of the YMCA other than the band and the song? All right. What does the YMCA do?
Well, now they're more like community centers, you see them a lot.
Okay. So they're community centers, and they bring kids in and give them opportunities to play sports or do things where they can get out and have something to do other than sit at home by themselves if their parents are working. Or they can get out and they meet people who are going to help them toward positive goals, right? At this point, that's their goal, is they provide shelter for the young men who are out there who don't have a place to live. They're going to provide food. And what they say is, if you want to come in and if you want to live in our shelter and eat our food, then we're going to talk to you about God. Because they want to kind of have the whole person, and we're going to help you as much as we can. All right, what about the Salvation Army? Anybody ever hear of the Salvation Army? Mm-hmm. Little guys with the bells at Christmas, right? What do?
They provide like meals and like clothes and stuff for the poor.
Yeah, they provide meals and clothes, other things that poor people need. So again, they get started at this time because how do we help the poor people? We provide for their needs, right? And again, they're like, hey, we're going to show them that the churches care, that Christians care, and so maybe they will become a Christian. All right. The ones that really super impress me, though, are the settlement houses. So these first two groups do amazing stuff. The settlement houses, it's when, you know, my wife, Susie, which is not her name, by the way, I come home from work and she's like, honey, you have built, you know, we have this wonderful house. We have the white picket fence in front. We have, you know, perfectly mown, manicured grass. We have 2.5 children, which is the perfect amount, right? Everything is working for us. And I say, yeah, things are great. And she goes, but you know what? Those people in the city, life still stinks for them. And I go, yeah? And she goes, you know what we should do? We should sell our house and we should get a little apartment in the inner city or a little house in the inner city, and we will buy it. And while you're at work, all those kids that are left at home alone, I will have them come to our house and I will feed them and I will teach them how to read and I will help them so that they have hope for the future. Now, how does that sound? To me, that's terrifying. Wait a minute. If we go to the inner city, somebody might rob us. If we go to the inner city, we could get hurt. You know, you're going to have 30 kids in our house and they're going to break stuff. Right? But what do? Can you see how many kids are there? Can you imagine taking care of all those little kids? They come in and they say, look, we know that, you know, both the husband and the wife are working. We know that you're doing everything you can for your family, but you can't make it. We'll take care of your kids. We'll feed them. We will do what they need to be done in order to give them a better life, right? So these settlement houses are the epitome of the progressives, right? Because we want to help people. We're going to change their lives. All right, different group. Women's suffrage. What does women's suffrage want? Okay, women to vote, right? It's kind of intriguing. Where are the first women able to vote?
Where or when?
Where? In the U.S. You can cheat. Okay, Wyoming, Colorado, Utah, Idaho. What do those states have in common at this time?
all in the,
Go ahead.
I say like they're all in the West and like big on like farming and stuff.
They're all in the West. They're all very small populations, farming. So let's walk through this, right? If you're a wealthy woman in somewhere, Richmond, Virginia, what do you do with your life? You're stay at home and someone takes care of your kids and you just kind of hang out and go to parties, right? If you are a woman living in Wyoming, what is your life like? You're working on the farm, you are doing everything kind of that your husband's doing to make sure that the farm makes it. So when it comes time and they want to become a territory, what do you need to become a territory in the U.S.? You need voters, you need people, right? Because you have to have enough people to allow the U.S. to bring you in. And I believe at the time it was like 35,000 people. If you're just counting men, it's going to take a whole lot longer to get there, right? What if you count women? You'll get there. So they're looking at these people and they're like, hey, women are working just as hard as the men are. They're just as important to the success of the farm as men are. They are just as important to our state as men are. Let's give them the right to vote. So they start giving women the right to vote. Now, I want to start back though. The focus on getting women the right to vote begins a lot sooner than this. It starts before the Civil War. And in fact, a lot of the women who are pushing for women's rights started out pushing for other people's rights. When they initially start, a lot of them are working for slaves. Like, I want to help people understand what slavery is like. Has anybody heard Elizabeth Cady Stanton? Yeah, she's really well known for pushing for women's rights. She starts out pushing for slavery rights. And she's trying to go places and she's trying to talk about what life is like for slaves. And anybody know what people say to her? You're like, shh, you're a woman. You think she's happy with that? No. She's like, oh, no. No. Let me tell you how it is. Angelina Grimke. Her father was a lawyer in South Carolina. They had slaves. As she was growing up, one day she decided, you know what? I want to play school. I'll be the teacher. I need somebody to be the students. Who do you think she might have selected to be her students? The slaves. Now, she is teaching the slaves to read and write. All of a sudden, an adult comes in and they're like, this is horrible. Is it legal in South Carolina to teach a slave to read and write? No, it is not. So they're like, you have to stop this immediately. They separate her from the slaves. And then, to make sure it doesn't happen again, who do you think gets punished? The slaves. They beat the slaves for learning how to read and write. Angelina Grimke is so upset that when she gets a little older, she leaves the house, she leaves her parents, and she goes up to the north. She joins the Quakers because they are anti-slavery, and she goes around telling everyone how evil slavery is. And she goes to a conference and she goes, let me tell you about what I lived in South Carolina with slaves. And you know what they say to her?
You're a woman.
Exactly. Hey, you need to sit down. There are men who can talk. How do you think she takes that? Oh, she does not take that well. So they push and they say, no, we are going to speak. Sojourner Truth. Anybody know who Sojourner Truth is? Former slave, right? Who is, by the way, what is her sex? She's a woman. And she hates slavery. She escaped slavery. She goes back and saves people. And she wants to go tell people slavery is evil, slavery is wrong. She goes to conferences and they say, shh, you don't need to talk. We have men here to do that. How do you think she responds? Not well. So these women actually have been trying to help other people. When they're kind of quieted down and they're like, no, I'm not going to shut up. Now I want the right to talk. I want to be able to tell you what I know. And so this is what we're going to do. In 1848, they have a gathering of women. And they say, you know what? We need to push for the right for women to vote. For a while, they actually have two groups because they're fighting. One says, we're going to push for black men and, women to vote. And the other says, you know what? Let's get women the right to vote, and then we can help black people. So at first, there's two organizations. Once we pass the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments, is there any other reason to divide? No. So they come together and they are working as the National American Women's Suffrage Association to get women the right to vote. So again, a big progressive cause, right? How do people find out what they need to fix? Has anybody ever heard of a muckraker? All right. So if you are a reporter, if you write for a magazine, if you want to write books, at this time, the best way to get known is to identify things that need to be changed. Is there a lot of stuff that needs to be changed? Yeah. Let's walk through a couple of these. Upton Sinclair in the Jungle. Has anybody ever heard of that book? All right. It talks about the meat processing plants. At this time, I'm a worker, right? I come in and I am cutting up the meat. When I come in, I work, I'm cutting everything, and there's not a whole lot of refrigeration, right? So when I'm done, what do I do with the meat? I leave it on the table, right? We turn off the lights, we go home. What do you think might happen during the night? Okay, one, the meat starts to spoil. Two, do you think that there might be an attraction for rats wanting to come, and roaches and other vermin, we'll just go with the broad term, who are going to hang out with that meat? All right, so when I come in the morning and I find rats and roaches and slugs and all other garbage on my meat, what do I need to do?
Just flick them off.
I either flick them off or I kill the rats and they just join the meat. Right? If it's rotten enough, I can cut it off, but otherwise, you know what? It's okay. Now, what happens when I'm working really fast and I'm chopping that meat up and all of a sudden, chop, there's a finger gone?
Doesn't matter, keep it moving.
Yeah, let's just keep it moving. Hey, if we grind it up, we can make it sausage or hamburger patties, right? So, anybody see any problem with this at all? Okay, a couple people are like, yeah, I don't really want to do that. So, he talks about what it's like in the meat processing plants. When you read this book, what do you think it's going to make you want to do?
Never eat meat again.
Okay, you either become a vegetarian or you're like, you know what? Let's change the laws and make sure that we have inspectors who are going to come in and make sure this stuff is good. Edwin Markham writes Children in Bondage. What do you think that might be about?
Factories.
Yes, it's not like you actually are tying kids up. It is kids who are working in the factories, right? What's their life like?
In simple terms.
Pretty horrible, right? I mean, they don't have hope for the future because they're working six days a week, 10-hour days. They're exhausted. Kids are not supposed to be working in the factory when they're really little. And he's like, we've got to fix this. Now, these help all the progressives to see what needs to be changed. Roosevelt is a normal politician. So even though he wants to fix all the corruption, he's like, I'm fixing everything I can. Quit bringing things up and making it look bad. So at that time, everybody had, if you could read, you have read 2 books. The Bible and Pilgrim's Progress. So a lot of the politicians, a lot of the important people at the time, if they wanted to show that they were smart and well-read, the best way to do that is to quote Pilgrim's Progress. In Pilgrim's Progress, you have this guy, and he's trying to make it through life, and he's traveling along the path, and there are all these people who are, pulling him off the path. One of these he passes is a guy, and he is just raking in the muck, and it's just garbage, and he never lifts his head from the muck. And Roosevelt's like, hey, you journalists, you guys that are just all you ever do is expose all the corruption, you guys are like this man with a muck rake. Look up and go, hey, look what President Roosevelt's doing. He's doing really good things. He's fixing this, he's fixing that. No, you keep focusing on the bad, right? So he's frustrated with them, but at the end of the day, they are the ones who are informing people, telling them how to improve things. All right, so how much impact do the progressives have? An incredible amount, right? So we had an election just a few days ago, or for the party elections, right? We have an election coming up. One of the positions is senator. At this time, you could not vote for your senator. You voted for your state level representatives, and they voted for the senator. Why is it important that you can vote for your senator?
Because the senator represents the people directly.
Okay, now the senator represents the people directly. If they don't represent you well, then we can vote them out of office, right? All right, what about recalls and referendums? Anybody ever hear of a recall? There's been some in the news recently. People who got elected to office and did things that the people didn't like. And if you get enough people to sign a form saying, hey, we don't want this guy, then pretty soon you can hold a separate election and kick them out of office. Is that going to make government responsive to you? Presumably, right? All right, what about referendums? Oklahoma held a referendum a couple of years ago. Why do we have medical marijuana in Oklahoma? A bunch of people got together and said, we want medical marijuana. So they signed a petition, and it was placed on the ballot, and the people of Oklahoma were able to vote, we want medical marijuana or we do not want medical marijuana. And it was not only added to the ballot, but it was passed, right? All right, the city commissions are now elected. Does that mean that your city commission is going to be more responsive? Presumably, right? The secret ballot. I'll admit, I'm really frustrated with Oklahoma because they recently said that you could take a picture of your vote. And I understand in one sense that's fine, but let's talk about what does the secret ballot do for you?
Keeps your privacy.
Keeps my privacy. So what happens if the president of RSU, and I'm not saying he does this, but if the president of RSU came to all the faculty and said, I want this person elected, and so I'm going to check to see, did you vote for the guy I wanted you to? If you don't go vote for that person, then you lose your job. Is that legal? No. It can be done though, right? If you have somebody with enough influence, they can say, you're going to vote the way I want you to. A secret ballot prevents that. What happens if I beat my wife and I say, you're going to vote for this person? With the secret ballot, she can tell me that she'll vote for whoever I tell her to vote for, but when she gets in to cast her ballot, can I know? No. She can vote for whoever she wants to vote for. So those are very good things. The party primaries allow, instead of a group of people who are powerful and they're sitting in a back room with a cigar, making decisions, we get to influence who is elected in the various parties, right? How important is that to our final election? Okay, because that determines the people that you get to decide this person or this person, right? And so, really important. What about the Pure Food and Drug Act? Does this have any impact on your life? Has anybody ever drank a Coke? Why do we call it Coke?
It was a drug.
Because they actually put coca in it, which is how you make cocaine, right? So when they said Coke makes you feel better, it really did make you feel better, at least for a short time, right? Do you put cocaine in Coke now? Why? Because you have to document everything you put in there, and the federal government goes in and checks, right? So they're going to know if you're having something. The drugs. If you go to a pharmacy and they give you a drug, it actually has to be the drug that they tell you it is, right? I mean, that's fairly important. But now they're going to do that. The Meat Inspection Act, why do you think they might have that? Yeah, Upton Sinclair, and telling us what the meat processing was like. They were like, nope, we're going to inspect the meat. Child labor laws are enacted. They close saloons, they improve prisons, they help protect abused women and children. They helped devise nutrition standards. They created public playgrounds. They established a minimum wage, and they created Blue Sundays. Anybody know what a Blue Sunday is? At one point, and it's not too far back, you actually had states who said, hey, everybody needs to have Sunday off. Everybody needs to make sure that you have one day off and you can relax from work, and they made it Sunday so that you go to church. Others decided, you know what, you can't sell alcohol on Sunday, because when you're on your day off, you just need to spend time with your family and doing fun things. So these are all ways that the progressives have changed your lives, even today, right? So pretty influential. Now, when Roosevelt comes in, he promised a square deal. He says, Can he run again for election? Yes. So he says, I want a square deal for everybody. Everybody gets what is a good thing. He says, look, I broke up monopolies. I intervened in the coal mines. The Democrats decide we don't want to fight Roosevelt on progressivism because he's going to win. So they move the opposite direction. They grab a moderate guy, Alton Parker. He's a judge. He supports the gold standard. It's kind of more, hey, we'll take care of the richer people. Roosevelt wins 56.4% of the popular vote. And as you can see, he wins the entire North. Most of the South at this time is still not willing to vote for a Republican. All right. So once he becomes president, he says the square deal is the 3 C's. He's going to conserve natural resources, he's going to control corporations, and he's going to protect consumers, right? While he is president, he has 25 antitrust suits. What is an antitrust suit? Anybody ever hear of an antitrust suit? All right. Big corporations. So we'll say Amazon. Who is Amazon's competitor?
eBay.
Okay. But it's really powerful, right? So an antitrust suit would say Amazon is too powerful, too big, and there is not any real competitors. We are going to break you up into smaller companies to force you to respond to people's needs. He also does the National Reclamation Act. He funds irrigation for the Southwest U.S. Anybody who's been out there is like, yes, that's a good thing, right? Because it's pretty much desert. He gets the Hepburn Act passed, which sets the maximum rates that a railroad can charge you for something, so that he makes sure that the poor people are able to afford what they can. They passed the Meat Inspection Act, the Pure Food and Drug Act, and then he creates national parks, national forests, wildlife refuges, and bird sanctuaries. Do you think people like Roosevelt? Yeah, most everybody likes Roosevelt. There are some people that are frustrated with him because of this. The Native Americans and the Western states are like, hey, you're taking our land and federalizing it. We don't want you to federalize the land. We would like to use it like we want. But through most of the nation, everybody really loves Roosevelt. But he has now done a portion of a presidency and a full presidency, right? So he's like, you know what? I'm going to retire. I'm going to go and I'm going to hunt in Africa and I'm just going to do fun stuff because I have helped the U.S. He says, I will go ahead and leave you with my friend William Howard Taft. He will take care of you, and he is thinking just the same way I am, so you don't have to worry about it. The Democrats pick William Jennings Bryan. Sadly, William Jennings Bryan, I think, ran for the presidency 4 times. How many times did he win? None. So Taft wins. If you note, almost the same. He loses a few states, but he does pretty well. So when Taft comes in, I want to go back and remember. Does anybody remember how many antitrust suits did Roosevelt get through in 4 years? 25. How many does Taft get through? 80. He also passes the Mann Act. The Mann Act makes sure that you are not taking women from one state to another for illicit purposes. Now, I know this might be shocking to you guys. You guys know South Coffeyville, right? Hope this is not too offensive, but anybody know why South Coffeyville was built?
Isn't it a prostitution town?
Yes, it was built so that you could do stuff that was illegal in Kansas, right? So if I want to have prostitutes, what I do is I set up a prostitution ring in South Coffeyville. What state is South Coffeyville in? Oklahoma.
I was gonna say, I didn't think that was Kansas.
No, it's Oklahoma. Now, the interesting thing, if I send the prostitutes into Kansas to conduct their business, and they come back and hand me the money, can Kansas arrest me? No, I didn't even leave the state of Oklahoma, right? Can Oklahoma arrest me? No, because there was no crime committed in Oklahoma. And so the Mann Act now says if you take women across the border, the federal government can now arrest you for the crime. Does that make sense? All right. He establishes the railroad rates with the Interstate Commerce Commission. He adopts a federal budget for the first time, which is pretty cool. They have the 16th Amendment and the federal income tax, which is not really cool, but probably necessary. 8-hour workday for federal contractors. Why would he say for federal contractors? Federal workers already have it. Does he have control over just a regular company? At this point, no. And so they say if you're a federal contractor, then you have to do the 8-hour workday. They set up a child's bureau or children's bureau that monitors child welfare, right? Positive thing? All right. Postal savings system. They actually set up the post office with a banking system that you could leave your money in the post office and the money would be there when you come back. And then finally, Arizona and New Mexico become states. So, I mean, when you look at this, Roosevelt should be really, really happy with him, right? You would think. However, they are not. So there were some problems with tariffs where Taft signed off on some things that Roosevelt's not happy about. But that's not the big thing. The big thing, remember, Roosevelt puts a lot of federal land in the West under federal jurisdiction. Nobody can use it. Under Taft, his Secretary of the Interior opens up 3 million acres for commerce, primarily oil. And they sell this land to oil companies. Nobody really knows because it's hidden. But one of the guys who is working in the president's cabinet says, wait a minute, this isn't right. And he says, you can't do this. Roosevelt wouldn't like it. And Taft said, well, you know what? I'm not Roosevelt. So he goes out and reports it to the press. And the press says, hey, Taft is selling these western lands that have been set aside. Now Taft fires Pinchot. Roosevelt is furious. He's like, first, you're cheating and you're giving the land back that I took separated, right? Secondly, when my guy tried to tell people about it, you fired him. So now, in the next election, Roosevelt runs against Taft in the primary. For everywhere, all the states that Roosevelt can win based on the people electing the nominate, person directly, Roosevelt wins. But do the people who are kind of behind the scenes and still powerful people making the decision, do they want Roosevelt? No. So all those people vote for Taft. Taft, there are more of those states, they have more electoral votes than the states that allow the people to directly elect the presidential nominee. So Taft wins the Republican nomination. Now, knowing Roosevelt, How do you think he will respond to this? Is he going to be like, oh, well, I did my best? No. He's like, you dirty dirtbag. I am not going to allow this. I am still going to run. So he creates his own party, the Bull Moose Party. He says that Taft stole the Republican nomination, and he goes on a train trip throughout the nation saying, vote for me and the Bull Moose Party. Does anybody know why he would call himself the Bull Moose Party? Because they're powerful, right? At one of the train stops, he actually is out and he's speaking, and a guy shoots him. He has a book in his pocket, I think. I don't remember exactly what it was, but the bullet hits the pocket, and the stuff in the pocket stops it. Now, if you're speaking from a train and some guy shoots you, what do you think you are very likely to do?
Leave and get rushed to the hospital.
Okay, leave and try to not be there anymore. Roosevelt just continues talking. Everybody's like, okay, this guy is pretty amazing. He just got shot. And he's like, let me finish up my speech and then we'll deal with that. Right? So this is the two Republicans who are competing for the nomination. The Democrats nominate a guy named Woodrow Wilson. Anybody ever heard of him? All right. Woodrow Wilson is a history professor, so you know he's smart and probably really good looking, right? Okay, I got one laugh. There's got to be better, right? All right, so he becomes president of Princeton. Then he is moved in to be the governor of New Jersey, and he enacts all these progressive reforms in the state. So they say, all right, we'll go ahead and have you. We think that you can run for president. William Jennings Bryan backs him up and says, I got you, right? So if William Jennings Bryan's going to vote for you, you know you've got it. Wilson wins. Why does Wilson win?
Because the Republican Party is split up, basically.
Yeah. If you look, is there any way that, Roosevelt only gets 88 votes, Taft only gets 8 votes? Had they not been competing for the same votes, it's very likely that one of them would have won. But when they're fighting against each other, they split the vote in half, and Wilson wins. All right, so what does Wilson do as president? He is a progressive. All three of these presidents are deemed progressive presidents. Wilson is much more behind the scenes. Like President Roosevelt, is he going to hide behind the scenes? No, he's going to come up, grab you by the throat, and say, hey, we're fixing this, right? Taft is going to be very, up in your face. Hey, we're fixing this. By the way, anybody know that there was a president that came onto the campus of RSU? William Howard Taft, between his presidency and before he became a justice of the Supreme Court, actually came to Prep Hall and helped devise the rules for the Oklahoma Military Academy when we first established the Oklahoma Military Academy. So if you ever walk between the train tracks and Prep Hall, you have walked in the steps of a president. So anyway, back to Wilson. Wilson lowers tariffs. He has the graduated income tax. What is the graduated income tax?
The more you pay.
Okay, the less you make, the less percentage you pay. The more you make, the greater percentage of your income you pay in taxes. It is interesting though, because it was 1% on an equivalent of $76,093, right? Which I would be super happy with. And now the top level is equivalent to $12,682,000. So just so we're clear, I don't make that. So I would not have been in the top, right? He establishes the Federal Reserve Act, kind of the current way we do banking. He establishes the Federal Trade Commission, which looks at businesses and determines are they doing fair things or are they violating rules and the laws. Once he's done this, he says, all right, I've done everything that needs to be done. Is there anybody in here who's like, is there anything left out? Did he leave anything out? Okay, tell me one thing.
Child labor.
Child labor. What else?
Women's suffrage.
Women's suffrage. All right, these are easy questions. What's the third?
Racial equality and desegregation.
All right, racial equality and desegregation. He has not touched any of these. Now, he comes up for re-election, and if you notice, he hits the Farm Loan Act, low interest loans to rural areas, the Warehouse Act, which says you can use your crop in a silo for collateral. Improvements in farm education, the Federal Aid Road Act. Now, all of these things, what are these focused on? Farming, rural areas, right? He has the child labor outlawed for interstate trade, and he establishes an 8-hour workday for railroad workers. Is there anything he's still missing?
Women's suffrage and discrimination.
Yeah, racial discrimination and women's suffrage. All right, we will see what happens in his next presidency. So, who are the progressives? Middle class people who care about poor. All right, what are their goals?
To regulate capitalism.
Okay, regulate capitalism, to
Efficient,
better working conditions. What?
efficient and honest government.
Yeah, an efficient and an honest government, right? All right, what are the settlement houses?
Also that soldiers volunteer to help the poor and the
Take
immigrants
care
from
of the
Europe.
kids.
All right, so I'm going to help the poor. I'm going to move in from the suburbs and live with the poor people and take care of the kids, take care of them. All right, how does Wilson win the 1912 election?
The Republicans, like Roosevelt and what was his name?
Taft.
Taft. The votes were split in half for them.
Okay,
That's why.
so the Republicans start fighting with each other and he gets to win.
Yeah.
So, for next class period, I want you to recognize, so this is the same progressives. They think they're going to help the poor in America. Once you start helping the poor in America, who else should you help? The poor outside of America. So we'll talk about how they actually start making changes to the rest of the world. All right? All right. So just to make sure you guys are with me on the papers, make sure that you are thinking about who you're going to write about. Check out the syllabus. Make sure that you start looking at the sources and what you need for the paper. You can put an outline together. But if you get it done early, what happens?
You need to get it checked.
Okay, if you turn it in to me early, if it's great, we walk away and you get an A. If it's not great, you get a chance to rewrite it, right?
When does it due?
Whenever the syllabus says it's due. All right. Thank you, guys.